Let's kick off with this quote. The grossly inflated sense of self-importance was official. That's exactly how singer-songwriter Brandi Carlile describes the aftermath of surviving a literally near-fatal childhood coma. You see, her family was totally convinced God had kept her alive for a reason, like he had a specific plan for her. But how exactly does a self-described mean, scrappy little trailer girl transform that incredibly heavy sense of divine purpose into actual reality? Well, that's exactly what we're going to find out.
So, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the incredible true story of Brandi Carlile. We'll be pulling from her phenomenal memoir, Broken Horses, along with some fascinating sociological studies and expert musical analysis. We're going to explore how extreme trauma, crushing poverty, and deep marginalization didn't just shape one of today's most celebrated musical icons, they actually forged her. Like a fire. Okay, let's jump right in.
Section 1. A Miraculous Survival. From the brink of death to a life in music.
Our story kicks off in the backwoods of rural Washington. Now imagine a childhood defined by pretty extreme poverty, a father struggling with alcoholism, and this terrifying brush with death that would literally change everything. Let's walk through this early timeline together. At just 4 years old, Carlile contracted a near-fatal case of meningococcal bacterial meningitis. She fell into a deep coma, actually flatlining in the hospital as her heart stopped multiple times. But she survived. And this abstract early memory of kind of living in the in-between of life and death, it set this unshakable foundation for her. Fast forward to age 8, and inspired by another kid performing, she actually steps onto the stage of the local Northwest Grand Ole Opry to belt out some Johnny Cash. No fear. By 10, she's wearing a poodle skirt, singing backup for a friend's dad who happens to be an Elvis impersonator. It's here she's learning from the back of the stage exactly how crowds react to a smile or to a rhythm. But the instability at home really took its toll. By age 15, failing special ed classes and absolutely terrified of having to come out of the closet at a brand new school, she and her brother Jay just dropped out of the 10th grade entirely.
And this brings us to a quote that brilliantly captures the core theme of her true story: only broken horses know how to run. Since her family completely framed her coma survival as this divine miracle, Carlile grew up with this intense, albeit darkly funny, sense of purpose. But here's the thing, it wasn't a pristine, perfect kind of purpose. Just like the title of her memoir suggests, which, fun fact, was actually proposed by her young daughter. Carlile was always drawn to things that were broken down or unwanted. She eventually realized that being a misfit, dealing with chronic illness, or just being broken wasn't a defect at all. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just not a defect. It was the actual wellspring of her resilient creativity. The suffering is literally what made her ready to run.
Section 2. Rejection and Radical Forgiveness. The Baptism Debacle.
So, imagine being the only openly gay teenager in a tiny rural town, bouncing from house to house, trailer to trailer, a staggering 14 times in 14 years. Notice the profound contrast this setup creates. On one side, we have this devastating public rejection. As a teenager, Carlile invited her entire family and all our friends to her church baptism. Big day, right? But just moments before the service, the small-town pastor pulled her aside and bluntly asked, "Do you practice homosexuality?" Even though he knew her and her girlfriend, he outright refused to baptize her. She ran out, totally humiliated in front of her entire community. But look at the other side of this experience, a private faith. Instead of just walking away from God completely, she leaned into a deeply personal spirituality. As a kid, she used to listen to this cassette tape of church songs to calm her anxiety, and right at the end of the tape was this mysterious, uncredited song with these massive, angelic, complex harmonies. Her parents swore they didn't put it there. So for the young mystic, this unsolved mystery was practically supernatural. She listened to it every single night. To her, the music itself was literal proof that God was real.
And this brings us to a really crucial concept: radical forgiveness. Rather than letting the trauma of the church's rejection completely destroy her, she practiced radical forgiveness. She took that deep institutional trauma, her family's outrage, and the sharp sting of exclusion, and converted the whole shebang into profound, empathetic art. She didn't write off her faith, she transformed it into her overarching songwriting philosophy. It's a real game changer.
Section 3. Turning Trauma into Art. The Biopsychosocial Genesis.
Researchers have actually dug into her life to see exactly how she translated these crises into a mature, creative strategy. Notice how every single major trauma corresponds directly to a creative action. It's like a map. The near-fatal coma at age 4 or 5, it didn't just leave her fragile, it gave her this unshakable existential confidence that fuels her abstract spiritual songwriting today. The extreme poverty and domestic instability she faced around age 8, well, that turned the performance stage into a psychological shield, a totally reliable source of validation. And that traumatic baptism exclusion at 15, that directly catalyzed her practice of radical forgiveness, turning religious trauma into the very raw material she uses to write songs. Literally nothing was wasted. It was all synthesized perfectly into her artistic identity. Which leads us to this deeply revealing quote from Carlile. She says, "I always feel like if I write this song and I tell the truth, if I show up here and I decide to be myself and people still accept me, then I guess I do belong here." Crafting original music became her ultimate mechanism for finding the belonging she was so painfully denied as a youth. By pouring her raw, unfiltered truth into her lyrics and standing on that stage as her completely authentic self, every round of applause, every single sold-out crowd became the acceptance she had been endlessly searching for.
Section 4. Winning the Grammy stage, from misfit to mainstream icon.
So, armed with this unshakable identity, Carlile transitioned from being this beloved coffeehouse cult favorite to an absolute mainstream superstar right alongside her bandmates, the Hanseroth twins. But the absolute turning point, that arrived at the 2019 Grammy Awards. She delivered this core-shaking, just tear-inducing performance of The Joke from her album By the Way, I Forgive You. And you know, it wasn't just a song, it was a defiant anthem. It was written specifically for marginalized youth, for refugees, for literally anyone who has ever felt pushed to the absolute fringes. When she sang, "Don't ever let them steal your joy," it was the ultimate, shining culmination of her radical forgiveness.
And man, the cultural resonance was massive. Just look at the validation that followed. You had Anna Kendrick tweeting that her jaw was literally on the floor. Sheryl Crow was in total awe. She even received a personal letter of congratulations from former President Barack Obama. Think about that for a second. This self-described scrappy little trailer girl had suddenly won over literal presidents and her own personal musical heroes, going on to build lifelong collaborations with absolute legends like Elton John and Joni Mitchell. No way, right? It's incredible.
Section 5. Championing the marginalized. Building a beautiful noise.
Now, what is truly remarkable about Carlile's true story isn't just the wild success she achieved, but what she actually decided to do with it. She leveraged this hard-won platform to give back, proving that her sense of divine purpose was ultimately driven by a really deep, empathetic responsibility to others. 11. Yep, 11. That is the staggering total number of Grammy wins Brandi Carlile has secured to date. I mean, it firmly establishes her absolute dominance and respect within the music industry. But for Carlile, those trophies are really just a megaphone for a much, much larger mission. Let's break down the tangible humanitarian impact of her activism, which she spearheads right alongside her wife, Catherine. Together, they co-founded the Looking Out Foundation, and when crises hit, they do not hesitate. They pivot fast. We're talking raising an incredible $300,000 in just 7 days for earthquake relief. That's huge. They pulled together $600,000 for families affected by ice through a massive benefit concert. And every single year, without fail, Carlile makes it a point to perform for incarcerated women. She tirelessly advocates for the misfits, the rejects, and the marginalized, using her massive platform to ensure they are seen, heard, and supported. Which leaves us with this final thought for today's explainer. Brandi Carlile's true story is an absolute masterclass in radical forgiveness. She took crushing poverty, severe illness, and devastating public rejection and synthesized them into empathetic, world-changing art. So as you reflect on her incredible journey, ask yourself, how can you use your own brokenness to build a beautiful noise? What hardships in your own life can you transform into your own unshakable strength? It's something to think about. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.